There's a version of every fight you've ever had where you were right, not partially right, completely, clearly right, and the other person was unreasonable, or cruel, or simply wrong. What's strange is that the other person almost certainly has the same memory, same fight, same exchange of words, completely different film. One of you is lying, except probably neither of you is. This is not a video about brains being fascinating. That framing is too comfortable, and it lets you watch from a safe distance like you're studying someone else's malfunction. The real subject is harder to sit with. This is a video about how ordinary people, not sociopaths, not narcissists, not people you'd call bad, become incapable of accurately accounting for the harm they've caused. Not because they choose to lie, because the machinery that keeps them psychologically functional is the same machinery that quietly erases the evidence. The illusion of autographical accuracy. Most people carry an unexamined assumption about their own memory, that it works something like a recording, that the fight, the betrayal, the thing someone said to you in the kitchen at 11 at night is sitting somewhere in your head, intact, waiting to be replayed exactly as it happened. It isn't. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent much of her career dismantling that assumption, and the findings hold up under decades of replication. Memory is not reproductive, it's reconstructive. Every time you recall something, you are not retrieving a file. You are rebuilding an event from fragments. And the rebuilding is influenced by everything you are and everything you need in the moment you do it. This has a quiet implication most people never sit with. If memory is reconstruction rather than playback, then every act of remembering is also an opportunity for revision, not occasionally, every time. You don't remember the fight. You remember the last time you remembered the fight, with small adjustments layered in, compounding with each retelling. So why does the rebuilding tend to favor you specifically? 3 mechanisms, layered on top of each other. The first is self-serving attribution bias, documented as far back as Miller and Ross in 1975, and confirmed across decades of research, including a large meta-analysis by Mazoulis and colleagues in 2004. The pattern is consistent. People attribute their successes to internal factors, their own skill, effort, character, and attribute their failures to external factors, circumstance, bad luck, other people's behavior. This isn't a conscious strategy. Nobody sits down and decides to remember themselves favorably. It's a default operation, running underneath awareness, shaping which details feel relevant enough to keep. The second mechanism is quieter and stranger, and it happens while you sleep. Research on sleep and memory consolidation, building on work by Matthew Walker and Robert Stickgold, has shown that emotionally distressing memories get re-encoded during consolidation, and that re-encoding isn't neutral. The emotional charge tends to survive intact. You still remember that the fight mattered, that it hurt, that something significant happened, but the moral content, the part of the memory that assigns fault, shifts. Your role in the story becomes gradually, and without your permission, more defensible. This is the actual neuroscience of the overnight rewrite. You don't wake up remembering a different event, you wake up remembering the same event with a different verdict quietly attached to it. The third mechanism is the one that ties the other two together, and it comes from psychologist Dan McAdams' work on narrative identity. His argument, laid out across decades of research, is that human beings don't merely remember their lives, they story them. We impose structure onto raw experience, protagonist, antagonist, arc, meaning. Because identity itself requires coherence. A self that doesn't cohere into a story is not a self you can live inside of. Here's the problem this creates. A memory in which you are the villain of your own story does not fit the narrative you require to keep functioning. So it doesn't stay as it was. It gets recast, not deleted, recast. You become the misunderstood one, the one who was pushed to react, the one who had good reasons. Here's where this stops being an interesting cognitive fact and starts being genuinely uncomfortable. These edits don't feel like edits. They feel like the truth. This is the part of Loftus's research that carries the real weight. Her studies on implanted memory didn't just demonstrate that false memories are possible to create using nothing more than suggestive questioning and repeated exposure to a false narrative. They demonstrated something more unsettling. Subjects who held a fabricated memory could not distinguish it subjectively from a memory of something that actually happened. The confidence was identical. The emotional texture was identical. There was no internal marker, no asterisk, no different quality of feeling attached to the false one. Related research on confabulation, particularly the work of neuroscientist William Herstein, shows that this gap filling happens constantly in people with no clinical impairment whatsoever. The brain doesn't like gaps. When a memory is incomplete, and most memories are far more incomplete than people assume, the brain fills the space with something plausible, something consistent with what it already believes about the event and about you. And it does this without flagging the fill as a fill. It gets filed as recollection. Sit with what that actually means. The version of the story where you were right may be, from the inside, completely indistinguishable from what actually happened. There is no alarm that sounds when the substitution occurs. You don't get a warning, you just get a different memory, delivered with full conviction, and no asterisk telling you it's been edited. At fourth, the moral weight. Most content on this subject stops here, at the neuroscience, satisfied with having explained the trick. That's not where the real question lives. If everyone is editing their memory to protect their self-image, and no one can detect when they're doing it, what does accountability actually mean? How do you apologize for something your mind has already reclassified as self-defense? How do you reconcile with someone when the two of you are, in a very literal sense, holding memories of two different events that happen to share a location and a cast of characters? This is where the concept of mnemonic humility becomes useful, not as a therapeutic buzzword, but as something closer to a philosophical posture. The idea is simple to state and hard to practice. Your recollection of events in which you had a personal stake should be treated as evidence, not as testimony. Evidence gets cross-examined, testimony gets believed. Most people extend their own memory the courtesy of testimony, automatically, permanently, without ever asking whether it's earned that trust. This connects to a pattern named by psychologist Jennifer Freyd, known as DRO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's typically discussed as a manipulation tactic, something a person does knowingly to escape accountability. But the mechanism this video has been describing suggests something harder to dismiss. DRVO doesn't require conscious manipulation to occur. If the underlying memory has already been edited, if the moral content has already been quietly reassigned during consolidation, then the person deploying that reverse narrative may not be lying at all, in any sense they'd recognize. They may be reporting with complete sincerity a memory that was never given the chance to stay accurate. That reframe should make this harder, not easier. It's simpler to be angry at a liar. It's much harder to know what to do with someone, including yourself, who has told a self-serving story and genuinely believes it. There's no clean resolution here, and manufacturing one would misrepresent the problem. If the editing exists to preserve a self you need in order to function, and dismantling that self-narrative completely is genuinely destabilizing, not metaphorically, but in terms of actual psychological stability, then what exactly are you supposed to do with this information? The honest answer isn't a technique. It isn't a 5-step process for remembering more accurately, because the machinery doing the editing operates beneath the level where techniques reach. The honest answer is smaller and less satisfying. It's a permanently uncomfortable relationship with your own certainty. It's holding the fight you remember with a slightly looser grip than you're used to. Not abandoning your version, just no longer mistaking conviction for proof. The next time you're completely certain you were right, and the other person was simply wrong. It's worth asking a question that has no comfortable answer. Is this what happened, or is this what you needed to have happened so that you could remain the kind of person you can still live with?